So let's start with bread and butter. Bread and butter for us is remote operations, third-party
Sure.
control rooms. What we currently have set up is 4 full-time desks running 24/7.
Right.
We'll call it 4.5. There's really kind of a half desk as well. And we're set up with long-term contracts there. And again, the same approach that I talked about with you in drilling is the approach we have is we've done this more than once.
Sure.
We're not sitting in the same control room that we stood up 20 years ago like our competitors and using the same technologies, getting used to the way things work. We're going to be a company that pushes the edge every time, and every time we've built a control room, it's better, shinier, runs faster, is more optimized, et cetera. And so we know the types of tools that we need to put in the hands of controllers to optimize that operation. But past that, we've done this so many times that we understand what's a failure, what doesn't work. We're not kind of a startup company in that, I know me and Todd were actually talking last night, and, he kind of said, what'd you say, Todd? Like, we're not really a startup company. We're just...
No, that's a poor way to think about it, right? So we're bringing expertise from on the operations side with your leadership, Jeff, and from IDM and from CNX. They're bringing expertise in the space in general overall. So we're not a startup company. We are really just a joint ventures of well-experienced professionals, and we're just put a company together, and we're moving forward.
Yeah, you hit it right there, Todd. A joint venture of expertise.
Yeah,
right?
and I'd say we're not really a startup, but the way we organize the business, the way we organize the operating agreements with CNX and IDM and all these folks is basically we're on a runway, and we're ready to take off. There's nothing going to slow us down for 5 years because the business is solvent very easily. Even if we fall on our face and don't grab any clients, which I know we will be adding new clients here and there, we're set up to run, and past that we're set up to R&D. For 3 years and to develop what I hope will be, and I consider it probably will be, the best SCADA HMI in the world for production operations.
Yeah.
So, we've got a lot of expertise in that space. We know who our clients are. So we're super excited to go after those. We've got kind of a backlog, so to speak, of things we need to get done over the next couple months to get these other clients kind of serviced and feeling good. And, hey, we've got everything set up. CRM looks great. The portal, everything you've got as far as, handing off data between the parties, et cetera. But once we get those systems down, again, we're operating live starting today, but once we have those systems down, we'll be opening it up and kind of talking more about the clients that have already reached out to us. So,
yeah. Well, I think the key thing, too, on the remote operations, because of the expertise, we're not your typical control room that is just doing surveillance.
No.
We're not surveilling just a pipeline and reacting to alarms. We're not. I use the term expensive insurance. If that's not the scope of remote operations for Opsite Energy, the scope is actually impacting production. Downhole optimization in remote operations, optimization there. Optimization in leveraging the operator because it's a high-graded. These are high-graded operators.
right.
So
Yeah, our average tenure on the desk right now is like 6.5, 7 years.
right. So it is a high-graded operator that can tackle remote optimization downhole and can leverage experience and operational experience, having spent time at the plant level, at the production level, as a lease operator, well tender, actually understands that part of the process and can optimize with, and not just be a reactive operator.
Yeah,
right?
we're not just hair on fire. It's what can we do before we start
Absolutely.
the fire, right? So we feel pretty good about this vertical. Again, bread and butter for us.
Yeah.
We'll be attacking this space. So those competitors I mentioned, you better watch out. We're coming. I'm not messing around. It's part of our plan. So we'll let you know up front that's happening. So let's jump into the next couple. We'll skip these two and we'll come back. But the next one I'd like to talk about, Mike, is because you're super excited about all things data, all things AI, the whole nine. But we have based on our lease and where we're at in Canonsburg, there's just a ton of Class A stuff right here in South Point, which is 30 minutes from downtown Pittsburgh. it's a really cool place. It's a really cool like business park that's, I don't know how many acres, Todd. What do you think? 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 acres, maybe more. Hundreds of buildings that are Class A material. But as a part of our lease here, we have access to a very large data room. I say very large. It's not a data center like, what do you call those? The big scale companies like AW. It's nothing like that. But for sure, we have space to host SCADA for our core business if that's something our client requires or wants or needs. But past that, we've got room, to put in like a full GPU cluster too, Mike. So can you talk a little bit about how we plan to use that space for energy and clients, et cetera, for Opsite, but past that, how we have kind of room to run and even more space than what we showed in that data center to kind of build this system out. And all we really need to find is the power to power it. So
yeah. Well, you hit the nail on the head there, Jeff. I mean, power hunger is the biggest challenge for data centers right now. Power hunger is number one. I was actually in the middle of pulling stats from Perplexity, but so power is a big deal. There's such a surge for that. Grid reliability is a big deal for any data center op. So increased demand is a big deal. The other thing that I think,
let me just to give a little bit of color to our data center, how it's set up. It is pretty well positioned. Just some things that happened in the past that allowed this data center to be here the way it is. But we're connected to 2 substations on the grid, so
right.
2 separate grids essentially.
Yeah.
We've already got the backup power. We've got full UPS for the building for the entire. And this is not some small building. It's a 4-story, couple 100,000 square foot building. UPS for the entire building as well as natural gas generators. So it's past that, if we add another power source like compressed natural gas, which gets produced right here in the region by CNX with 0 horsepower,
right.
Getting that here and kind of a test bed for as data center growth happens and explodes, and we know it will over the next 4 years. It's already happening
Sure.
across the globe, but we're also kind of uniquely positioned close to Virginia, Appalachia, et cetera, where the majority of these data centers rest or sit in the United States currently.
Yeah. So Virginia is the Virginia and near the Appalachia and the Pennsylvania area is the single biggest hotbed for data center activity and growth, right? So you talked about that. So there's a grid challenge. Well, we're positioned here to handle that, right? So that's a plus. Why the data center? Well, if you're an operator, let's say you're a small operator and I have a few hundred wells. And I don't want to go all in on some big investment on some sort of SCADA platforms and then get stuck somewhere where my play can stay or go away. Then what you want to do is you want to leverage a data center for that because you can implement tools like, we'll say one. One is Ignition Cloud Edition. You want to put that on the cloud. I can host it there. I can still apply control in the field separately, but at the same time, I can hybridly collect my data there. It's available to me in terms of an infrastructure as a service. And then it allows me to expand, grow, or shrink as I need it, no matter where I have an oil play. So if you're a producer and you're working in West Texas, there's a great opportunity for a data center capability. But then if I do something in Louisiana or I create an M&A situation where, hey, we bought some assets here, we want to deploy them quickly. Well, guess what? You have the expertise of Opsite, but you have the bolt-on functionality of a data center.
Right.
So I think that's the big plus, right? You don't have to go outside and get a learning curve about what you're trying to do. You have, from the inception of your M&A or your operation, a team that understands exactly your challenge.
Right.
And we provide the data center to do that. So that's what makes us positioned for it. Now, naturally, we're here in the Appalachia with it. There is a hungry challenge. I guess my real point is first come, first serve, I guess, so you definitely want to get on it. And we're positioned to develop this in the data center. And we see lots of phenomenal growth in that. Also, like you mentioned earlier, Jeff, it's going to allow the CNXs of the world to really test the power of CNG as a replacement for a grid, an energy-hungry grid.
Right, right. And that's going to be the biggest challenge, not just for our clients and Opsite, but for the world and the U.S. in general, right?
And the other thing, Jeff, is that we speak BOE, all right? So if you're listening to the podcast, if you're watching, we care about we care about that BOE conversion. We want to see what your dollars look like for LOE. We understand it, so we want to help you. So in your CapEx and OpEx budgets, we feel that all the way from the operation and into even the data center, we can, I think as a team, we show how that makes sense and why you may want to have that operation inside of a data center cluster versus having a larger infrastructure set up in West Texas.
Right.
Okay.
Cool. Well, moving past data center, I'm going to combine the next two, which I skipped because they're kind of, in the same ballpark. But one, like we said, was modern SCADA design. And our platform of choice there through IDM is Ignition, even though they can develop in many other applications. But Ignition makes the most sense for us and probably for most of our clients who really want to go the data route and apply that machine learning, et cetera, out of the box. It's kind of like ready to do so.
Sure.
So the other one is, the machine learning, AI, and capabilities, et cetera, there. So what's happened over the last, let's call it 90, 120 days is IDM has an onshore U.S. team. They have an offshore team as well. I've had, it's been pretty cool because they brought the offshore team here to Cannonsburg. They're literally here today, a couple doors down, deving on a seven-figure AFE for CNX to kind of modernize, and that was also part of the business plan. Is as we bring in these assets and these new desks, that we don't want to start with the old and have to figure it out. We want to start from scratch with modern technologies, modern systems like Ignition that allow us to kind of push it to the next level. But ultimately, as a minority partner at IDM, we're connecting the dots for them. If a client comes and needs these types of services, IDM kind of services that. We're just kind of, I wouldn't say the middleman, but we're involved. And you say, well, why would you want to be involved? Well, going back to the 2-3 months we spent here at the dev team, we've got SCADA developers, and this has kind of been, doesn't matter where we're at, small midstream company, EOG, Howard, Apache, you name it. When you seems like, at least in my experience, you've got guys that can dev SCADA really well, but typically those are not the guys that did spend boots on the ground, and in many cases ever, right? But understanding kind of the basic understanding of how Ignition works or any SCADA platform, the things that are important to the client, the boots on the ground, all the way up to the CEO, and how to apply those in modern design is where the partnership kind of separates us in offering this service through IDM. A little bit different than just going to a Taiga or a Strata or someone of that nature, because they just don't have, at least in my experience, and maybe things have changed in the last few years, I don't know, they don't have the practical application of, hey, we've been here, and someone or some people that can connect the dots between what's being devved, what's being HMI. We got the Todds of the world who understand data probably better than most people in the world and how to apply it, et cetera. But even there's some things that Todd, just because he didn't, run that non-exempt course of his life like we did in the field, et cetera, there's some connection problems there sometimes. So we're able to bridge that gap, and not every client would, appreciate this or benefit from it, but there's a lot of them that do, especially in the E&P side.
Well, the other thing too, Jeff, to keep in mind is that, and we're speaking for Todd, but he's there behind the booth, and I would say if I looked at Todd's experience in 30 years and our own, everyone, when they hear the word SCADA, it is relegated to the OT side of the business, and it's seen as something that you only deploy at the desk, when the reality is that all of your operators, anybody in the space, they want mobility. They want a cleaner, more defined user interface, a user experience. They want more. They don't just want your typical controls on a desk. What they're looking for now is mobility. So if you're a producer, your pumper, lease operator, well tender, whatever you want to call them, an automation tech, they want, if it's in their philosophy, they want a level of control, and they want that user interface and that user experience to do three things: empower them, easy access with very little latency, and give them recommendation, all in that platform. That's what they're looking for now. That's changed. And so the other thing about teams like IDM and myself and you is that there is a generational impact that is happening in our industry right now, where the folks that are out there looking at wells, operating, tanks, doing, looking at bubble towers, whatever you want to call it, that generationally, there's an expectation for a high level user interface and a user experience.
Yeah. And as the workforce, continues to get older, we've got boomers exiting the workforce.
Right.
I consider myself a Gen X, even though I'm the youngest Gen X. You can call me a millennial if you want, but it doesn't bother me. But maybe it might. But the millennials that are coming into the workforce, and again, they're in positions of management now, right?
Yeah.
These are 30, 35-year-old folks. They're starting to get access to budgets and things like that. So those guys and gals grew up with an iPad in their hands, right?
Right.
Me and you did not. Maybe
Right.
we grew up with a Walkman and a tape deck, something like
Right.
that. And it wasn't until, I was 20 years old that I got a cell phone, right? So this generation of workforce expects to have productivity tools,
Right.
modern HMIs, ways to interact with data that they do in their personal life and that they've done in their personal life since they were 3 years old, right? So it's a different set of people, and they have a different set of expectations. So you might still run into the old SCADA guy who says, here's what I want,
Right.
black and gray screens, or I want this, that, and the other. But it's not far from, hey, that guy's going away. And we still run into those, don't get me wrong. But the ones that we run into that we really like to work with are those 35-year-old engineers who just got a management position, who know what they want, or have an idea of they want to take something to the next level. We come in there and show them how to get there through. Maybe it requires some sort of automation upgrade in the field. Maybe it requires some sort of devices in the field. We got IDM to help that. Maybe they just want modern SCADA design and everything. They feel it looks great. But even going back to like 2014, one of the things that was really cool at EOG Resources, who that year, Forbes put out an article, this is the Apple, the oil field. Well, what do they mean by that? EOG had a development team onshore and offshore in Houston and offshore as well that was about 180 people.
Right.
And those guys, if you could dream it, imagine it, think of it, they could develop it in a mobile application in a couple of weeks. Huge team, right? And this is all done internally, even to the point to where when they're called the Apple of the oil field, people could sit in their bed at night at 10 o'clock and steer a drill bit, right? Like, this was 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago that EOG was able to do this. Awesome stuff. But when we got into the production side of the business, past midstream, remember I said we started midstream, we started up a production desk. It was like, one, we had to go sell that. It was not an easy sell because everyone was like, no, go away. Like, we don't want any eyes on our operation, right? But we said, they had 50 routes at the time, I think 2,500 wells, something like that. And we said, give me your 3 best routes. Like, what are your routes that have the lowest LOE? And again, at the time, EOG had the lowest LOE in the lower 48 for any producer. Okay, and I think it was like $1.70 a barrel or a BOE at that time, something in that range. But they were like number one, and they were beating second and third place by quite a bit. So to go in there and say, give us your 3 best wells or 3 best routes, which are potentially the 3 best routes in the entire nation, right? If you think about it that way, let's go see if we can fix those. Let's go see if we can clean them up. Let's go see if we can optimize how people get from point A to point B. Let's go see if we can optimize people prioritizing downtime events that are going to cost you X amount per second, per minute, per hour, et cetera. So we were able to do that. We said, give us 30 days with these routes. And, lo and behold, their downtime percentage on those routes decreased by like 30%. Their LOE decreased by like 20 cents. So what was already best in class in the lower 48 got better by 10% in 30 days. Yeah. Now, the other 47 routes they had were not as well managed, or maybe they didn't have as much production, or maybe they were geographically challenged because they were, in South Texas and off on the Hoff Ranch and just things like that make producing oil and gas more expensive. Man, we really had a heyday with those. I think some of those we got into the 60% range as far as downtime change. So,
So I think in terms of design, the Opsite team begins with the end in mind. I think that's the best way I can put this, because you're going to take something and a lot of when people talk about SCADA design, usually what they do is they let the customer lead them to the water. Like, hey, I'm deploying this other a paywall system. when I say paywall, I'm talking about these larger behemoth DCS and SCADA platforms that they want you to pay them up front in order for you to get access to the product and the expertise. And so when you do that, the problem you face is you can't get to the end in mind quickly. So, which is why we tend to favor Ignition in terms of design, just because you can get it for free, you can train for free, you can deploy it in a proof of concept for free, and then you can learn what you need to do, and you can deploy in a short time to value, a beautiful user interface, create the user experience, and then start with what it is the outcome is. Because if you're listening to the show, or you watch us, we are concerned with the outcome, not the product. It is the outcome. It is that. So when we talk about design, that is what we're looking at, is what is the outcome of this? Is if the outcome is we're just another platform that a operator sits in front of, then we haven't done our job in terms of design. But if we've taken the elements and we've seen what you're looking for is, what did I say? Mobility, latency, a user experience, recommendations, and there's other things, lightweight, open architecture, report by exception. There's all those things that you want. In terms of design, that's what the outcome is. That's what we want.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so those three things are really, we mentioned them as four: remote operations for hire.
Right.
Doesn't matter if it's production, midstream, drilling, completions,
Right.
renewable energy, HOA gate, turn
Salt
on the
water
lights,
disposal.
turn on the lights at the softball field, you name it.
Yeah.
NOC,
We're for
SOC,
hire there.
data center.
Yeah. NOC, SOC 2 compliant data center.
So that's, again, bread and butter. Typically, that's a longer-term contract. Margin's not like, the best in the world, I guess, but it depends on the customer and their need. Past that, we got the SCADA integration, all the way up to machine learning, cloud, et cetera, connecting it to the ERP, the business. All that encompasses what we do. And then, of course, the third big piece there is, where do we put this stuff? Where do we store it? Do we have access to it? Do we manage these things in the cloud? And we can help you set up those environments as well. But we also have physical space to host SCADA for clients who are part of the third-party control room, GPUs for people who are not involved in control room at all, or even in energy at all, you name it. We've got those space. So really, those are like the 3 to 4 cores. We'll spend a little bit more time on the rest of these, but they're kind of self-explanatory. So anything else to add to like those 3 to 4 main verticals that we're,
Well, I think one of the exciting ones that I love to talk about, I'll keep it short, but is on the integration into the cloud and leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think that if you're in the energy space, or even as a person, people believe that AI is out of their reach, and it's not.
And so, let me ask you this, Mike. Like, when you say that, there's a dozen ways to get there.
Sure.
Right? And maybe one of the reasons people think it's out of reach is because there is a dozen ways to get there, and it really is dependent on, I guess it could be dependent on your budget, but it's dependent on what your current structure, your infrastructure looks like, what does your field automation look like, what SCADA systems you have, and some of these things.
Who's your technology partner? That's a big deal too.
Yes.
Yeah, and the path to these things don't have to be so daunting. You just need someone that can shoot straight with you, put together a plan, be transparent about all the options, not just the ones that make them the most money, right? So like that vendor that's pushing paywall product is probably getting some change in his pocket on the backside from that, potentially. Things like Ignition and all that, like you said, it's open. It's there is a fee to actually, get a license, but you can develop without a license, right? And you can do POCs, you can do all those sort of things, but
yeah. So I Jeff, it can be out of reach for a few reasons. A lot of this is they toss around words like digital transformation. To me, digital transformation isn't paying large firms like McKinsey and Deloitte, and I'm sure they're doing good stuff, but having them come in, paying them $500,000 to give you one spreadsheet and a presentation, that's not transformation. Transformation is, I'm a small producer in West Texas. I want to optimize my wells. I want to reduce my downtime. I want to reduce my total LOE cost because I see it out of control in operations. Okay, here's a playbook for artificial intelligence or simple machine learning to optimize your operation, it's available. You have to remember, machine learning in terms of a term has been around since World War II. Okay, this goes back to the 1940s in the Framingham heart study, where doctors leveraged the machine learning, a simple application of machine learning to determine that if you're overweight, have high blood pressure, you are more prone to have a heart attack based on the data. And I'm making this, just an oversimplification of the process. My point is that when you leverage that for operations, it's the same thing. It's saying, what can we look at in terms of our historical data, and can we apply that in a machine learning model to recommend and deliver optimization? Yes, you can do that.
Or find patterns, right? So
Sure.
when you say looking at historical data, let's say you got an artificial lift well, I don't know, pick any flavor, plunger lift, okay? Say you had a plunger that didn't get caught or didn't come up, or missed a run or missed a trip. It's just not optimized, and it's going to provide a signature in the data. Some of the more complex models and stuff will actually they're not that complex. It's basically they're just going back to a SQL table, looking at data and saying, where do I see a signature like this in the past 6 months, 6 years, 60 years, whatever it is you have data on, times however many wells that you have with a similar setup on artificial lift, and it can kind of tell you things like, well, here's all the instances we did there, and what did we learn from it?
Sure, and the key thing to note, Jeff, is that, remember, all of your machine learning models have already they're out there. The most common one is one that we call XGBoost. And you don't have to be technical to understand this. Machine learning models are put into two categories mainly. It's either regression, which is time series data on pipeline. I'll give you a good example. That's one. And then there's classification. Classification is when I want to classify data for my different plant types. If I have a plant that's an amine plant, I don't classify the data the same way I would if I'm running a cryo plant. So the way I break that chemical, the way I leverage equipment, the way I optimize is a classification set of data where if I'm looking for leak detection or I want to optimize alarms, I'm using time series data, and I'm using those periods. And those are two different forms of the machine learning model. But I think when you demystify it, you realize it's possible.
Yeah.
Right?
And so let's just go back to break this down and make it a little bit easier to understand. Let's use an example from EOG. Remember when I mentioned they had all these, the Apple, the oil field, they had automation, they had the first thing they did in the Eagle Ford was set up 7 comm towers. And I'm not talking, 30-foot towers. These are like, FAA registered large towers. And I remember coming down from Fort Worth to South Texas, and I was, one of the first employees in that region. In fact, that region started out in Corpus Christi before they moved to San Antonio. But I was, working out in the field, and it was like, well, just look for the tower. You get there, and it's like, okay, well, wow, there's literally like 7 wells drilled in the Eagle Ford as far as delineation wells across, 600,000 acres, all the way from, LaSalle County all the way up to Gonzales County, just kind of the prolific oil field play of the Eagle Ford.
Right.
Well, they had 7 wells. Guess what else they had? They had 7 communications towers. So they started with the end in mind, and EOG took what they learned in the Barnett, the Marcellus, a little bit in the Marcellus, a lot in the Bakken, and even in stuff in the East Texas, Bossier, Haynesville plays. And when they got revved up, this was like their 5th revision of this. So they knew, hey, comms are going to be important. Automation, SCADA, all these sort of things are important, and they really did a good job in the field.
Sure.
We didn't have our hand in that. By the time we got our hand in it, was like, hey, we got all this data. What do we do with it? And literally, I was like, hey, SCADA guy, pull me 30 days of data. And he was like, oh, no one's ever asked for that. And no one's ever looked at it. Like, literally, it's like, wow, you got all these things hooked up. But,
right.
and so to make a point on this, I remember we went to a meeting, and I just printed out 30 days of data. And it was on 11 by 17, front and back, and it was, a stack of paper. It was a whole ream of paper, right? And in that ream of paper, who was doing the machine learning? It was me, like, just going through, applying filters. What can I gather from this data? Even to the point to where, like, there was one tag or one alarm that we got across 50 facilities, 50 routes, 2,500 wells. There was one alarm we were getting, and it was like a comm loss between, because in the Eagle Ford they had, longer flow lines. I think the average flow line for EOG was like 0.8 miles, something like that.
Right.
So, but they would gather in common tank batteries, central tank batteries, CTBs, and they may bring in 5 wells, maybe up to 20 wells. Some of these pads are very large. And some of those had a little comm sensor at the well because they were communicating back to the CTB and the smaller tower that communicated to the large tower. So anytime we lost comms there, it was shutting these wells in. And I said, hey, look, this alarm cost you in this month alone $87,000. And you know, someone in the room immediately was like, that's bullshit. This is not something that happens. We'd know about it. Well, I said it only happened 35 times, and it cost you $87,000. Like, it's 35 times in a stack of data that this large, it's hard to find, right? And across 50 routes, what you got to think about, Mike, is these guys are running a route. Well, they're only on the route half the time, right? So they're on days on or they're on days off. And when he's on days on, this other guy's on days off. And so 35 times across 50 routes that are getting managed 50% of the time by certain folks, they may not see this alarm for once every 3 months on this route or this hitch, this, you know. They may see it twice a month. They may see it once every 3 months, once every 4 months. Of course, it's not an issue that anyone thinks is a problem, but it still costs you $87,000 every single month.
Right. So, Jeff, what you're saying is because the data was siloed in a route, that one tag in that one route, first of all, it's not visible to the naked eye because no one's looking at it.
Yep.
Second is there wasn't a position for business intelligence to tell them something they didn't know. Right. And then finally, there was nothing that was measuring that to give them either an issue with operations or a competitive advantage.
Right. Yeah. And it wasn't machine learning. It was Jeff Perry learning. Right.
Right.
And it was, how did we do this? Well, I took this database and I applied filters. Right. We went in there and calculated deltas on downtime. Right.
Right.
And then we calculated the impact because we brought in all the production data behind it. What is the impact when this well went down for 7 minutes? What did it cost EOG? Right.
Right.
You know, excluding things like flush production, whatever else. That's always going to be what people talk about when they're trying to like combat you. But we were looking at that, and 35 wasn't the big one. That was just an example I threw out there because I knew they didn't think it was a problem.
Right.
And sure enough, they took the bait and they were like, "This is not a problem, Jeff. This is not a problem." Well, let me show you why it's a problem and why you can't see it or recognize it.
And when you immediately aggregated the business intelligence and brought the dollars, you can see what happens if you apply a methodology of analytics to solve a problem and reduce an operational cost.
Yeah, and
that's what you did. And you did that just from you applying Excel and making some changes. Hence, this is the power of AI or machine learning, simply put, and you can do it at larger scale now, and it is so available. And what you just said is what is very common with producers. It's not a problem because I would have known about it.
Yeah.
And that's really not the case. That's because you don't have something in place that's already giving you the intelligence to even tell you that.
And this was 10, 11 years ago when we had poll cycles in the 15-minute range.
Right.
You know, the product that Todd has deployed here at CNX is polling instantaneously. It's a second poll cycle. And so now we've got 15 times 60 more data than we had at EOG. And how do you solve that, right? That's not a Jeff Perry learning type of thing. We need, now that the data is so dense, we need these technologies to actually make sense of them. So that's one of the reasons Opsite's here today, right, is because we know it's not that hard, but you got to kind of know what you're doing and where to point this thing and understand operations at the fundamental level.
Which is, I think, separates us from our competitors. If you have competitors that have a control room, great, you monitored, that's fine. But what we're talking about is, hey man, we're gonna look at your data and we're gonna apply what happens operationally, because we've been there. We're gonna apply what should happen, what we look at in terms of true integration and true learning with your data, right? So we take those seriously here at Opsite. That for us, I'm passionate about it. Obviously, you're excited about it. And the excitement, again, it's translating from 10, 12 years ago to now, and there's even greater tools that would turn that into something that can be done quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the things I would add to that, guys, back here from the production booth, is you guys talked about AI kind of being out of reach for people. Yeah. Well, that comes back to affordability too.
Right.
And one of the big reasons as a technology arm to Opsite Energy is we're going after leading edge technologies. Well, the Ignition SCADA platform you guys mentioned several times, well, it has all those hooks in them already, and so we can deploy it faster, quicker, cheaper. But we can take to the smaller companies this very large AI model that can do your recommendations, that can give you some level of control, so you don't have to go through a ream of paper and determine what the patterns are yourself. And then it's not about people and analysts, it's about large volumes of data that you can now find the chunks of gold nuggets in them.
Yep.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think data will always give you that competitive advantage, Todd. The other thing it's going to do is it's going to tell you what you don't want to hear. It's going to tell you what no one is saying, and it's going to give you something that you can't see. And so I think when you deploy that, that's what we're talking about. And so that's, I think, again, is the separator for Opsite Energy.
Yeah, and so 10 years ago, 12 years ago, our path, Mike's, we were talking the other night, at dinner or something. He's like, man, why are we always fighting with these people? And, it's just like there's always a boogeyman, right? But it's telling people what they don't want to hear or exposing something that has happened for a long time that was inefficient or unoptimized, et cetera. Some people get scared, right? And so our plan is to go in and talk to these clients, and it's like, we know you're going to have those folks that are, on the fence or, they don't want to be exposed, et cetera, and they're going to fight like hell. You really just got to show the value. And a lot of times this can be done in a proof of concept. Outside of a proof of concept, if you're someone who's like interested in third-party remote control services, we're still going to apply this stuff if you allow us, if you sign on the dotted line, to take your data and gather insights, whether you're paying for it or not.
Yeah, and so
and then once we have the insights, we'll bring them to you and decide if you want more insights, type of thing.
Yeah, and so real quick, if you're watching the show, just so you know, if you reach out to us and put in a comment right now, we can get on a quick call with you. You can go to our website. You can ask for, more information. And then if we can book an appointment, I want to bring you a copy of a book by Eric Siegel called The AI Playbook. I'll bring that to you, and we can talk a little bit. I think it's a great piece to give it to you and kind of walk through some of that because it's got some great methodologies. If you don't know, Eric Siegel was one of the folks that was instrumental in deploying Orion, which was the system that is leveraged by UPS. And so that's one thing to look at, but just want to put that out there. If you reach out to us, you've got a comment, you want to set up a meeting, we'll definitely do that, and I'll get you a book, and man, we'll talk about it.
Cool.
So.
Well, Mike, I mean, we've kind of gone over most of this stuff here. I appreciate you coming in today, and Todd, thanks for helping us out on the booth back there.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, like Mike said, give us a call, leave a comment, get in touch with us. We're super excited about what we're up to here and how we can help you out.
Share the link if you get to it. If you're an automation tech, automation engineer, in engineering, instrumentation, electrical, anyone, you can catch us here at Opsite Energy on the Energy Tech Podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.